just after hours that I learned it. So kids, movies, and then I love browser extensions for some reason. I love to tell the internet how I'm going to experience it rather than fiddle around. Google, I don't really like the other two. Short-term goals, Linux, and all that kind of shit. Writing a book about this topic. Long-term, live in California. So, that's me. So, we're going to talk about these things today, a little bit of history. We're going to talk about let, we're going to talk about block scope, we're going to talk about destructuring, generators, iterators. A library, build tool called Tracer, so that we can begin to use some of the new stuff now, and have Tracer will help us with backwards compatibility for browsers that don't speak modern languages. And things like CoffeeScript is there too. So I'm just going to show Tracer is just another option. So the history is important to kind of understand why we're at where we're at and why it's taking so wicked long to get this stuff out. So for anyone who didn't know, in 1995, Netscape's like, hey, we're going to make language. Browsers are going to start thinking. They had a guy named Brendan Nike, they gave him 10 days for some reason, and they said build this language. They were really influenced while he was building it, while he was testing it, and even during the first beta releases by Sun Microsystems. So that's why they gave it JavaScript. It's kind of Java-ish in syntax, but we all know that they're completely unrelated. So. And then in 1996, it became an official language of ECMO. And they're just kind of a standards organization that monitors stuff and standardizes things. And their official script is ECMAScript. So the spec is ECMAScript, and JavaScript is its implementation. It has other implementations like ActionScript, or I don't know if you can say VBScript properly. It does have other implementations. JScript. So hey, it's right. My wife, she's probably like, go get the dog. Okay, so anyway, the history got ugly. So Netscape gets 2 versions out before everyone starts getting excited about what's happening. They start thinking about ECMAScript 4, and by this time you've got too many companies, and everyone starts getting excited. So they have this idea of, well, let's do ECMAScript 4. I don't know why they skipped 3. But 3, no. They were going to do 3, and then they couldn't agree on it. So they're like, well, let's do a subset of that and call it 4 for whatever reason. And then later we'll do 3, which doesn't make any sense. But anyway, these people who were up here that were working together and kind of getting stuff out, they kind of had, Douglas Crocker kind of references that as the Fellowship of the Rings, because they're like, it just fell apart here. He's like, this is where we stopped being buddies. And we couldn't agree, the lawyers got involved, we got lost in 3.1 versus 4. Other people get involved. IBM is worried about the floating and the floating point operations and the inconsistencies in mathematical operations. So they do everything they can to make sure that stuff gets done. Anyway, last year, 4 falls apart, but a small subset of 3 everyone can agree on. NES5 gets approved, and some browsers, most of them, except for maybe one, has implemented that stuff. So, and then everything else that wasn't implemented was called Harmony. So, I mean, when we talk about the future of JavaScript, so a little bit about Harmony. So it's not done yet, and it's not probably going to be done for a long time, but currently there's a spec underway to do a subset of Harmony, and it's called ECMAScript.Next. And I'm going to talk a little about, should we call it ECMAScript.Next or ECMAScript 6? I'll talk a little about that, because you're going to read, when you read about it, some people call it one, some people call it the other, so I'll try and define that a little better. So, but anyway, today we're going to be doing a lot of our stuff in Mozilla, because they've implemented the most of it. Last time I talked about this, someone got really mad at me that I was like so browser agnostic, but for this thing, Mozilla is just kind of leading the edge on this. So That's why we're going to do a lot of it in Mozilla. Not because I prefer it, just because they're the ones kind of leading the edge. But there's other things that can help us use Harmony, write Harmony code today. And Tracy compiles one. It's kind of a Google project. Alex Russell from Google, he built this library. And he kind of thought of it in the same meeting as Brennan Ike, the guy who made JavaScript. And so Ike built Narcissus, and so they kind of compete. They're a little bit different, but we're going to do some stuff today in Tracer compile. So,
you say CoffeeScript, it compiles to?
Well, CoffeeScript doesn't compile, but it will compile to the newer code as it's available. So you don't have to like continually refactor your code. So I mean, I'm not huge into CoffeeScript. I know people really get into it, but it is a way, despite whatever bad things people can think about it, it is a way to get into this newer code and more performant code faster than if we tried it on. Does that make sense? Okay, so we hear about this. I want to talk a little about, is it ES.Next? Is it ES6? Is it ES Harmony? You know, which one do we call it? So ES Harmony is kind of this big subset of stuff. And ES.Next and ES6 are a subset of that. So this next version that everyone's excited about won't be Harmony. It will just be a piece of Harmony. Harmony's got a lot of stuff they're not going to have time to fit in. Like the mathematical stuff that IBM is concerned about, probably is not going to fit in. So ES.Next and 6 kind of cross over. So next implies that they're talking about putting it into the next release. It might not make it in, but they're at least trying to hash it out and decide if it makes sense to put it in. So when you read ES.Next, it means it might not make it in. ES.6 is the official spec, so when it does get released, it won't be called ES.Next, it'll be called ES6. And then Harmony is just, it's ES6 plus, you know, a whole lot of leftover stuff. And it's really, Harmonies and these things, they're really influenced by languages like CoffeeScript and Python and other modern languages that have some real nice syntactical sugar that makes reading code and writing a lot shorter. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that today. So if you didn't get the code, here's the code if you need to pull it up. So the first thing I want to talk about is let. So let, it essentially is the new var.
Can we go back for
Sorry.
a little longer?
Sorry about that. We good? Alright. So let is the new, we're all used to writing the word var. Let is the new var. And you don't have to like go through your code and like replace all let because you'll break all your code. Because it works differently. And I'm going to talk about the differences today so you can understand why it's potentially faster and going to consume less memory. But there's different ways to use let. There's definitions, expression statements, looping, and then when we get into destructuring, you'll see it pop up again. So I'm just going to go over these real quick. So, but yeah, var's not going away. I mean, what we're comfortable with, I mean, imagine if the internet broke. So, var will be here indefinitely. But let solves namespace cluttering and variable hoisting that happens. So, if you don't know what the namespace cluttering is or the variable hoisting, let's go over it real quick. So, here's kind of a simple example of variable hoisting. So, in a C-based language, if we declared a variable inside the scope of this if, and then we tried to log it outside of that scope, what would happen?
Works.
Yeah, you use exception, right? So this isn't that. What happens here is, at the top of this code, when the Java just-in-time compiler checks this out, he goes and grabs all the vars. He doesn't take the one up, but he just takes var A up to the top of the code. So var A becomes global all of a sudden inside the scope. And then what it leaves down here is just A equals 1. So then in here it says A equal to 1, and then down here the log is actually a 1 way over the That's known as variable hoisting. It goes through and it sucks all the vars, the declarations, up to the top of the current scope. So did anyone not know that happened? Sucks. I mean, it's good sometimes, but you get unexpected results. Because right here, I'm kind of expecting that it's not going to be available here, but it is. So it's going to be available until that scope ends, which may not be ever. So in Firefox, I'll do it in here, but if you guys want to go along and run this code, Firefox has a tool called Scratchpad in it. You can just hit on Windows or Linux Alt F4. I don't know how you do it on the Mac. Probably the same. So
That's normally close window, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it? In Linux, it works. So. Okay.
Okay, tools, web developer, Scratchpad.
Right. What? No. Okay, now my other screen is totally messed up. Good, that's what I want. Okay, so here we just kind of, I'm just kind of going through what happens. Kind of like what I was talking about. You guys probably can't see that, can you? I don't know if I can blow it up at all.
Control plus?
What's that?
Control plus?
Yeah, it's not working.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone have a hard time seeing it?
Control scroll up.
Yeah, control scroll's not working.
Yeah, I can't read that.
Can you not see it? Sorry, guys.
That's okay. I failed the eye test.
Oh, you're good, dude. I should have scrolled my screen down a little bit.
Is this just the examples that was in that
Yeah.
zip file?
Yeah.
That should be fine then.
Are you sure?
Just have-
Well, let me get it. Let me try to get it.
I can see here. That's much better. Oh, that's good.
Is that better? Okay. I'm actually going to put him over here now. Okay. So this is Scratchpad. So, yeah, you can see what happens. What actually when the code compiles it, up on top that var A, he gets stuck to the top of the code, and then inside that if block, he just assigns the value to it. So it takes the declaration up top, but not the value gets hoisted, just the declaration of the variable. Does that make sense? So until A2 equals 1, it is undefined. Does that make sense? And what happens? We've all experienced that, whether we realize that that's what's happening or not. That's what's going on. So yeah. Anyway, if we come over here and run that, Control R, you can see it logs them, it sees them outside of that if scope. So we're gonna now let's do a let one. So if you go into the files, the second file. So here, we actually have scope control, like you'd expect in the C language. Because let sticks wherever its most closest curly braces are become the scope. So let's only going to, this B, only is going to exist inside that if statement. So we're going to get a browser error on line 5 when we try and log that. It doesn't hoist like we're used to. Right? So that gives us a little more predictability at least. I mean, possibly going to see more errors, but at least we'll see them early on. So, and now the code reads as it's going to perform. I mean, there's no unexpected variable hoisting. And this, well actually, because the JIT compiler doesn't really have to, before it runs it doesn't have to analyze it too deep like it would a var. It's less deep, you know, the browser will perform a lot more if we use lets instead of vars. Okay. Let's go on to, does anyone have any questions? If you do, just raise your hand, I'll stop Yeah.
I have a question, maybe we'll get to it, but does let hold on to does the B hold on to its value in enclosure?
So, come again.
So, I mean, suppose that you have your let inside a closure, an enclosure you're defining, it hangs on okay, right?
In a closure, do you mean inside a function?
In a function that creates a function that,
The self-executing functions, the closures?
yeah,
Just inside the scope. Just whatever the closest curly braces are, that's as long as it's going to exist. After that, it gets garbage copy. So, how
Yeah,
about
it should work fine. So if you were to do a set timeout down below inside of, well, that wouldn't work because then you got a function inside of an if, and that's not really allowed. But yeah, if you were to create a function and then do a set timeout inside of it, have another function you called from that was in the same scope as the variable x, you'd still get x.
Cool. Thanks, man. You're AJ.
I am.
All right, so here we already know what it's going to log. It's going to log undefined, and it's going to log 0. We'll run this. That's because, on line 1, it hoisted up the variable, and sorry, this is just another example, just so you can see it doesn't matter if there's a... I don't know who this is. Just take it. Just take it. You're interrupting me. You're on the air. Did I pick up? I thought, oh no, sorry. So yeah, the first log, obviously, it's not defined yet. It sees it, it's just not defined. There's two kinds of undefined in JavaScript. And it's because of the var. One undefined is, I see it, but it doesn't have a value. The value is not defined. It's undefined, so it's undefined. The other kind of undefined, and it's a lot more serious, and it doesn't recover as gracefully, is if you just name a variable that isn't anywhere. So if I come in here and say, right? He's totally going to freak out. He's going to say, oh, yeah, should I do it on that string? Right? So yeah, it's just a completely different kind of error. This one's, that doesn't even exist in the scope, let alone have a value. So those are two different kinds of undefined. And let gets rid of the, it reduces the one where it recovers gracefully and forces you to handle that stuff on your own. So, any more questions? Oh man. I'm gonna skip to 4 because it just talks more about hoisting. So I am going to go to 5 for those who are following along.
Have they approved yield?
Have they approved yield?
Yes.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about that. Who has that?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. It's actually inside the generator, yeah. So, okay, so here, so yeah, we kind of walking through this, we're going to kind of see how we're going to have multiple A's and multiple B's and how they get reassigned. So at the top, A equals 5, B equals 10. By the time we reach the end, B doesn't equal 10 anymore. The top B, that B equals the 1 from line 10, 11. And then the A remains untouched because it's inside a lexical scope. So anyway, it logs the appropriate one. When you get inside there, it will, and you log A, it'll be 4. When you get back outside, it'll be 5. So hopefully this isn't too basic. I'm just trying to go over it.
So in summary, let limits the variable's scope to the immediate block, not to the function.
True. Yep.
and it shadows the outer variable.
It shadows the outer variable.
Hides it from the.
Oh yeah,
scope.
yep. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so I'm gonna go to file 6. And this is the last talk about hoisting, I promise. There's 2 types of function declarations right currently. You've got a function definition like on line 11, where you actually say function and function name in parentheses and you carry on. And then there's function expressions. And that's where you say variable test equals anonymous function, right? So these get hoisted differently. That's why I want to talk about it, because we talked about hoisting. I just wanted to go over what's going to happen when you, between the two, because sometimes it's confusing. I just wanted to explain it because it confused me. So up here, we're going to console log test 1, and it's going to actually run test 1 because a definition, if you put a function clear at the bottom of your code, if it's a definition like test 1, it hoists it clear back up to the top. So your functions all exist at runtime. When you do an expression like that, it's a lot like what we were saying, bar a equals 1. It hoists test 2 equals undefined up to the top. And then its function value is not going to get assigned until line 16. So up on line 8, we're just going to, it's going to throw an error saying that value didn't get hoisted because of the way that you set up your function. So anyway, any question? I just wanted to point out the differences in function hoisting too. So it's like file 7, just as I promised, I won't do any more hoisting. So file 8. So in file 8, we're talking about expressions. So let expressions, let me just run this real quick. Okay. Make sure yeah. So an expression is, you say let and you open up some parentheses and you say temporary var name equals some expression, and you can comma separate those out as many as you want. And then after you close your parenthesis, the next line of code is the scope, and then everything after that just goes back out to the scope level stuff, to just kind of your regular global level or your function level where you were at, or if you're inside an if statement in your if scope. So you just get one line to do something with that let stuff. And so you can see inside, when we log XY on the very first line, we got 51 because of how those inner variables were calculated. And then on the outside, the second log, it just grabbed the global ones. So, any questions on that? That's a let expression, is what it's called.
Can you use curly braces with it to extend that scope? Or?
Yeah, so that's the very next kind of let thing, and that's called a let statement. So let me open up file 9.
So the variables went back to their previous value after the let statement?
So let me pull back up real quick, 1 second.
So it's like their parameters, function parameters that hid the outside variables?
So inside the let statement, inside those parentheses, you just say, my variable name is X, and it's going to equal, and it can equal anything you want. Null, it can equal a function call, it can do whatever you want. And just like any other variable setting, except for that X and that Y inside the parentheses are only available on the very next line of code. So,
Or within a block.
But they aren't really referring to the X that's declared with the var.
no, it's a new X.
It's a new X.
New X. And the lexical scope of that is just the very next line of code. It's like an if statement, exactly. If you write an if and you're only going to have one line of code after it, you don't have to wrap the following code in braces.
But please do.
But do. Right? Definitely do.
Yeah, but So the X in the
In
addition.
the let expression?
Yeah, in the right of the equal sign, that
That's-
X refers to the X
Yeah.
outside, and
Yeah.
the other X is declaring a
To the
new
right of-
X and a new scope.
To the right of the equal sign, it's whatever.
So if you wanted to simulate that, it would be like grabbing all the existing variables and passing them to a function.
Ish, yeah. Right?
Which is kind of what we have to do right now.
Yeah.
In JavaScript.
And we're gonna talk a lot about that. Oh, I gotta hurry because there's so much to talk about. So,
It's neat though that the compilers can simulate that already.
what's that?
It's cool that this compiler.
That like Mozilla you're saying?
Well, I mean, that like the, either CoffeeScript or Tracer.
Yeah. They're different. We'll go over Tracer at the end. Hopefully you guys can read about it. So this one, it just logged a 5. That's what we got. So what happened there was we said, let first equal to 2 plus 2 and then divide that by 2. Let second equal 2 divided by 2 and then add 2 to that. So the first one's going to be 2 and the second one's going to be 3, right? Just because you have order of operations. And then it's going to, whatever is the very next line of code, it's going to actually return that. So you can assign that out as a variable. So I just say first plus second, and it returns first plus second to 00, and then I can log 00, which is what we got. So anyway, you kind of get these implicit, the last line of code is going to be returned. So if you want to return null or false, you got to say return null. That's the helping. That make sense?
So you can use return, or
You can, but if you don't, it's going to return that.
okay, so like Ruby.
And keep in mind, I'm talking to you guys about ES.Next. So you need to keep reading about it because a lot of this stuff, they're still like emailing and talking and opinioning about it. And it's open to change. I even had to change this talk from a month ago because of how much stuff changed. Yeah.
How does Firefox, if Firefox has already implemented this stuff, are they just?
So they tell you, like on the API, so this is open for change. This is not compliant with the current spec. Like they say it. That's why Tracer compiler is really cool because you write your code and then it will compile it for you and you don't have to worry about, you know what I'm saying, mayhem ensuing because the spec changed. Or CoffeeScript, same thing. Okay. Any questions? Sorry guys. Hopefully I can keep it up with it.
What's that form of let called?
This is just another let expression. So I'm going to show you a let statement. Someone already asked about it. So this is just the same thing as an if, right? You could wrap it up and make your own scope, and you can make it as long as you want, right? So in this let, that x and that y that we create, they last until the second curly braces, and then when we do that last log, it's just logging the first one. So let me go ahead and run that. That makes sense? So you can, kind of like an if statement, you can have a let statement that will create a temporary variable. If you know you're just going to throw it away and you want it to be garbage collected and not collect with the namespace, so just throw it in there. That makes sense? Sometimes I don't make sense, so I'm asking because seriously, I'm trying to hurry, so you can do this in, so you can do this in a for loop too. For loop support let. And so the old way, on line 5, it would actually log 10. It sucked I up to where? The top of my scope. The new way, we're going to get an error on line 10 because it's going to say, dude, J doesn't exist anymore. It just got stuck in that scope. So when we have a bunch of for loops inside our code, we don't have to give them all different iterator names because they all have, they're all kind of scoped up. So if you're doing nested, you're still going to want to obviously use those. Anyway, sorry guys, I'm racing. I have an example file, 12 and 13 are just the same thing inside of a for in and inside of a for each loop. So it's the same idea though, so I'm just going to skip these two and you guys can read those up. This one is kind of something that we wish we've had for a long time. It's called a block statement. I should have put that. I didn't even title any of these files except for the file name. So a block statement, you just randomly throw out curly braces now, and you can get a temporary lexical scope for as long as you want. And then as soon as it hits that last one, it's open for garbage collection. You don't have any access to those variables anymore. So kind of nice.
So the reason you would want to use this would be like in place of an anonymous function type deal, or?
I think that's definitely how you do it now, right? In JavaScript, if you need scope, you have to do an anonymous function.
Maybe.
You're forced into it, essentially. Whereas they
Yeah.
don't make you.
Maybe, I mean, maybe if you just wanted to mutate something and return the value afterwards, I don't know.
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking like in Ruby, the way they use that, like I'm not too familiar with Ruby, but I remember they have just these blocks, lambdas, that get thrown around, and I'm wondering if it serves the same purpose or.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I just wrote about what it's capable of. I didn't get too much of the theory behind why we needed this. But I can see where it could come in useful. I can see where you might want to split that off. Go ahead.
So on topic, but does Node support any of this stuff?
So Chrome supports some of this stuff. V8 supports some of this stuff. It doesn't support as much as the Mozilla does right now, but it supports some. So on Node, if your Node has the latest V8, you can use it. So
You can use this?
some of it. Chrome's just they've implemented the stuff they want to implement though. So
Where can I find out? Is there a table somewhere that?
that's another reason why I chose Mozilla is because Chrome doesn't really have a statement saying these are the things that we have working. They said we have some of these things and others, and then and others is just nebulous, and I can't find it. So, and I didn't sit down to just like try and see which ones did and which ones didn't. So
I just tried let and node, didn't work.
didn't work.
But I am using like 6.15, and that's like 2 weeks old, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Const, like if you pull up Chrome, and the other new variable declaration is const. So you can say const a equals 1, and it's just constant. It's not mutable. If you try and say after the declaration a equals 2, and then the very next line you log a, it will still be 1. It doesn't error at it. I don't know why, but at least in Firefox. At least in Firefox. So one thing though that I didn't point out in these slides, if you say let a equal 0 and then let a equal 2, so you basically said let a, you declared a twice, you'll get an error. So you can't say let a, because it's kind of reserved it off differently than it used to.
Looks like you could use blocks, or what are you calling that?
That's a block scope.
A block scope?
Yeah.
Looks like you could use that.
Chrome? Is what you're saying Chrome can? Or Node can?
Well, I assume Node can because Chrome seems to be able to.
Okay, so,
The one that I'm just aching for in Node is yield to get rid of callback hell.
okay, so this one is called Destructuring. So currently, I mean, imagine, some random API gives that JSON object, right? So now in my code, just look at this first one. I'm going to say ID equals X object ID, and width equals the width, and more arbitrary manipulation of that object. And then I can finally do something with it, right? So destructuring is different, right? If you say let, and then you put your variable names inside of the curly braces if it's an object. If you're destructuring an object, you wrap that in curly braces. If you're destructuring an array, you put the braces around there, the array
It's
braces.
like list in PHP.
Okay. I'm not PHP. Austin teach me PHP, so.
It's alright.
So then you can just say let ID and width equal X object, and then and then you're done, and then it goes in X object. It says X object.id is that, and X object is that, and then you can just log it. So it just destructures your objects. There's a lot less code writing and syntax and minification gets better. Go ahead.
I could run it, but if you don't, is the let required, like CoffeeScript,
if you left off the let right there.
I don't know, do we need to leave it off? I could say bar, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, can you say bar?
Well, if you, in JavaScript, if you leave it off, it automatically becomes bar and hoisted to the global scope, so I'm sure it'll work. Let's try it.
So if Chrome is very conservative about their adoption of this, do you think it's going to take a couple more years for us to play with this stuff?
I don't know. I listened to a podcast with Paul Irish, and he talked about them getting serious about this stuff. So,
Well, the real question is, when does IE adopt it? Because that's everybody's too afraid to play with it until then.
I know, really. That's why at the end I'm going to show you some stuff to open up so you can kind of start thinking about how can I write this stuff today without having, because your IDEs are already starting to support it. Like IntelliJ just released it, whatever is currently solid in the spec support for. So the IDEs are starting to support, completion and errors in code, but we can't write it, so we would trace your compile and stuff like that. We'll get closer. CoffeeScript also shields us from some of that stuff.
Question on this example, the very last process external obj to function. You've got let list of scalars there. Could you say let array equals x obj, and it would just suck all of the properties of that object into that array? In the case that you don't know how many properties you're dealing with, say you've got an opaque object of some sort.
I don't know, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, play with that. I don't know, honestly. I'm not trying to be rude. I just don't know. The next one is the destructuring array, though. So let me pull it up. So this is file 16. Okay, so we just kind of, so index 1 in this incoming array is just a string, so A becomes a string. Index 2 is a string, so B becomes a string. C becomes an array. D becomes index 1 of the fourth index. So the fourth index is this array, and D is that first index of that. So you can do nested destructuring inside of the destructuring statements. Does that make sense? So we kind of have an example there of nested destructuring on that.
What if you want to be index 3?
E, comma, F.
I don't know, probably comma, D, I don't know. Somewhere. Let's try it. Any word? Yeah. Make sense? Am I leaving anything out? Hope not. Okay, I'm going to go fast. We only got a few more minutes left. If I'm making any mistakes and someone knows more or less than me, please speak up. So here's something that someone asked for yield. What was it?
That's the reason I came to this talk, dang it. Just yield. That's all I want.
See yield, huh? Dude, I thought we were best friends already. Alright. So yeah, so if you use yield inside of a method, when we researching a yield, and you get a magic method called next, which just says continue. Wherever you yielded, you just go on from there. So in this one, all he's going to do is, first time through, he's going to yield 0, 1, 2, 3. So out here we're going to get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are break out, right? Then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to do 10, 11, 12, and then just 13. So let's go ahead.
Okay, you know what drives me nuts? They could put a next keyword into the language, but they couldn't put something in to manage flow control.
Dude, that was a smart comment. I didn't even understand it.
Well, so flow control is like, how do you manage all the asynchrony, right? There's like 11,000 different libraries, and when you talk to any of the JS experts, they're all like, oh, it's trivial, it's only 70 lines of code,
Yeah.
so we don't need a standard for it. Everybody can just write their own and implement it differently and have it be confusing and no clear winner.
I kind of think it's cool that you have to force. I like how it is asynchronous, that you have to force it to be synchronous like this and force it to yield stuff. I kind of like that stuff. So.
No, I think it's cool that they're adding this, but I think much more is needed. A flow control construct, like for example, when you adding like a dot callback or something to a function, so because jQuery implements it one way and some other libraries implement it differently. So it's interesting they standardized on this, but something that's been plaguing the community for so long.
So I subscribe to their email chain. I get like 30 emails a day, and they're emotional about JavaScript. So it's amazing that they've agreed on this stuff. I read it, I was like, what? These are adults. they're seriously emotional. They care about it, and don't cross Brenda Knight.
Really, huh?
So you get an iterator too in the new API, and Mozilla's already got this obviously. So we got an object here, and when we iterate through it, it's just going to go through, and it's going to return us an array. Index 1 is the key, index 0 is the key, index 1 is the value. Let's go and see that. So yeah, I logged the first one, and I logged the third one in here. So this one and this one. So that's why the value of index 1 on the second one is a complete array, because that's how it was inside the object. So that's anyway. I mean, you don't use this for iteration for destructuring purposes, but to iterate over an object kind of makes it a little easier than what you might have done. Put it in a for loop, suck out the key name, retrieve from the object the values. Okay.
And do you happen to know if the iterator has consistency in how it will put out the keys of the object?
So what I've seen so far is it does it. No, it didn't do it alphabetically. No, I mean I don't know what the spec says. I just know that the way that Mozilla's implemented it, it's in the order of their declaration inside the JSON.
And that's how most of them have done it, like implementation. The spec is that it is undefined, so it could be random order. And that's one thing that like people complain about.
We love random, huh?
Yeah.
I love differences. No. Okay, so Chrome. Everyone, I mean, if you want to go to trace or compile, did I put a slide? I have a slide. I lost it. Is the slideshow? No? Have the slideshow? Yep. I don't know how to get it over to the other screen. No, don't do that. What? Jeez. Let me get the URL real quick. Find the mouse real quick.
It's code.google.com/p/tracer-compiler.
And then you can just try it out in your browser there. So from here on out, we're going to be going in here. So, I've seen a lot of this emotion spark from people trying to turn JavaScript into Java, and people freak out anytime they do that. Anytime you use a word from Java, they all freak out and try and call me and say, hey, we're not turning it into Java, whatever. But then they kind of add a whole bunch of stuff. a lot of the stuff that they're working on now is very Java. Let me turn this off.
Does anybody know if CoffeeScript has something that's equivalent to yield?
CoffeeScript guys.
Not that I'm
So here
Yeah.
we say let Aaron be new fighter. Because I'm not a fighter, but it's not like a functional prototype class. This is actually a class definition. And the way that they've got the setters and getters working here, I actually had to implement methods to set and get, but you're supposed to be able to say set and then variable name, give it a function and get, and anyway, it's not working. It was working and they broke it, so I had to change these to just methods in here. But anyway, yeah, then I can say punch and attack and mayhem and Suzel there. But yeah, there was also mix-ins, inheritance, but they took that out for now because people got emotional and they didn't want to put it in the scope. So for now, mix-ins, which is so much nicer than inheritance, is gone. So here's one that we'll really like. You guys will really like this one. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to use every single day. But that stuff, and then we're use this stuff every single day. So default parameters. So height with a default of 200. The number of times with the default of 1. And then I say do an action, and it says I'm going to jump 200 high, and it only does it one time. But then I can pass it to 10 or 4, and it will jump 10 high 4 times. And do an action, and I can say jump 30 high, don't pass the second one. I tried passing it comma 30, have to do it, jump 200 high 30 times. But that's just for stockpile. I mean, I'm sure it will work once it's out. So that's default parameters, though. So I mean, how many of us at the very first 2 lines of our code is like var a equals incoming parameter or 0, or you know what I'm saying? So we all do that. So this just gives us an official way to work that around that. You know.
I have a question here.
Yeah, yeah.
Does null work for the first argument?
Null?
Will null be overridden by the default?
So if you pass it, oh yeah, I tried that. I tried passing undefined, and it was undefined. Yeah. So I tried passing undefined as the first parameter, and it said I will jump undefined high. And then I was like, well, we're on null. I will jump null high.
It looks like in the compiled code, all they're doing is checking the arguments dot length.
Gotcha, thank you.
So then we've got rest parameters, which we should like. So yeah, you don't have to you don't have to sit there and list out how many ints you're going to get passed or how many arguments are going to be in the function equation. You just say ... and then whatever you want to call your variable, your parameter, and then down inside, you can talk to it. This is actually an improvement on arguments, because we've always kind of been able to do this, right? We've always been able to say, this implicit argument guy, right? And he kind of acts like an array, but he's not an array. If you try and do array things to him, he breaks. So these rest parameters, what they're called, they're an array. So you can do all the array stuff that you do to an incoming parameter, and you don't have to do funkify it to make it an array. It just actually is an array in this new version. So anywhere in your code where you're doing arguments, you can always replace it with that and get some array goodness. Does anyone have any questions on those default the rest parameters? No? Okay. So now we're going to kind of do the opposite of rest parameters, and these are called spread arguments. So when you're passing in your arguments to your function. So I've got nums. It's got 3 indexes. 1, 2, and 3 are the values in index 0, 1, and 2. And when I say add, I can pass it num sub 1, and then I can say and num sub 2, or I can just say dot 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 nums. It's an array. It's a spread argument. So then the function, it will get into the function and it will spread it out. It will spread that array out. And you guys can see here what it ends up with is 3. So it just takes out index 0 and index 1. It spreads it out into the parameters. So it makes it easier. You don't have to sit there and type all your rubbish from all your arrays and their sub-indexes and stuff. It makes it easier. Questions?
I was just going to mention this is also available for Node. It's a Node module, so you can just
Spread stuff? Cool.
the tracer thing.
Oh, tracer. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can write this code in Node if you require that module. It's just
It's awesome, dude. Spread parameters more. Oh, yeah. Let me just clear this real quick. So here, I kind of, when I created D, I kind of spliced in other arrays and it spread them out to make. So when I log D, it actually logs a consecutive array. Can you guys see kind of how it's doing that? Because they all have different numbers. So in the second index there, it spread out at B. So it took up index 1, 2, and 3. So 2, 3, and 4, going there. That makes sense? I was doing that. Any questions? It's a pretty simple example. I'm sure that there's going to be more complex ways to use it. And I'm sure that some people will do it and they'll confuse me. But it's going to be exciting. Here's one that I think is going to be cool, and then this is the last thing I'll talk about. Well, this is the last code example we'll go over. So these are ones, they don't even know what they're calling these things. Hash. Someone's called a hash rocket. That's a stupid name. But they just don't want to write the word function anymore, because we minify our code trying to say bytes even, and you got everywhere this stupid word return and this stupid word function. You can't get rid of it. So this hash rocket. These hash functions allow you to shorten that up a little bit. You saw I was able to call it instead of my name's Aaron. So that's just the function declaration. You just use a hash instead. So that makes sense. Pretty simple. Minification will just get better because of that. Especially imagine things like jQuery where it's like one big ball of anonymous functions. So that kind of stuff will get a lot smaller because of this stuff. So yeah, because of what AJ said earlier, IE, and when are they going to do this? They're never going to do this. They're scared of this, man. Imagine how it will help them, though, if they did. Well, it might not. I don't think there's all. But, so if you come here, there's a lot of stuff you can read on here. Where's it? Talk about API. Language features. So here talking about all the different stuff you can check out and look at. Strawman means that it's not decided upon. It means that ACMA TC39, which is the committee deciding, TC39 hasn't decided. And so TC39, they listen to the community though. So if you jump on Twitter and tweet them, I mean, it makes it into the emails. I read the emails and people talk about it, and they talk about it. Like I see an email, you see a tweet, you tell them that, hey, this guy tweeted this makes sense. And they'll talk about it to Brennan Ike, and they'll talk about it to Douglas Crockford and Alex Russell and all the other guys who represent Google and Yahoo and Mozilla in these meetings. And so TC39, it's not people, it's companies that send representatives, and oddly Microsoft's like a big player. Most of the meetings happen at Redmond. Didn't make sense, but so yeah. But feature things like tracer, when it gets more complete, I think it's kind of in its infancy. It's in version .2, I think, version .1. It says in the URL, it's .1.
So, what was that again you said on Twitter? What was it? Hashtag or name or whatever?
Come again?
Didn't you just say something, mentioning something on Twitter?
Yeah, mentioned, like, tweet the guys. Follow David Herman at Mozilla, and I mean, he's like one of the brainchilds. And you say something to him, and be prepared. I mean, he's wicked smart, so he'll say something stupid. Like, I'm not gonna tweet him. But I mean, if you have a thing and you know what's going on, talk about it. And he'll tweet back and say that's rubbish or good point. And it will end up in an email in front of a lot of really important people if they like it. So I mean, if you're like, oh, I really love this syntax from Ruby, talk about it. If he likes it too, maybe he'll talk about it. I don't know. But yeah, this is what they do full time. So anyway, I just want to encourage you guys to get out there. I work at Alias Church, and we're working on implementing tracer compiling to our build so that we can use this stuff without having to worry about the browser, the one browser.
So tracer compiler is trying to match more of the syntax to JS.Next, whereas CoffeeScript is kind of like a new language.
Yeah, but they're both going to get you to the same end, right? Like, you can write one basic code that eventually is going to get more modern, and you didn't even change your code, right? So you wrote this code, and the compile eventually turns it into something for you. CoffeeScript, you write it this way, and the CoffeeScript compiler is going to get more efficient and use newer features, and you don't have to do it, you just take advantage of it. So some of those things, I mean, I know people who really love JS, some of them fight CoffeeScript, and I understand why. I haven't completely warmed up to it, but it does have some redeeming qualities like this, where it gets you a little bit closer to your goal of using modern JavaScript in your browser, and not having to always use bar because of that. I mean, some of the simplicities of languages. So yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions? We good? I didn't repeat any questions.
Is Safari okay? Are they doing okay with this stuff?
Safari,
It's fine.
yeah, they have a couple comments the Apple makes. Apple's definitely part of TC39. I've seen it make some comments, but
In IE 10, IE 11, they're taking a really conservative approach to all this.
no, I mean, most of the meetings happen at Redmond. Most of these TC39 where they get together and they're going to corral and talk about it, and actually live rather than over email like they do most of the time. They happen at Redmond, so I mean, Microsoft's invested into it, and I mean, they're at least giving it lip service, which we're all used to. So,
See, we should redirect all IE users to aarp.org.
Jeez. So anyway, yeah,
Corporate users.
that's what it is. Any other questions? We're good.
Do people use this with Node at all, you think?
You just said it has a tracer module.
So there's a tracer compiler that there's a node module for this. So you just run tracer C, and then you give it your directory with your
JavaScript.
JS.Next code, and then you give it another output directory, and it just iterates through all the files and outputs the compiled version.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, so exactly what you saw here on the screen, where he's typing up top and then it's compiling it down bottom, something freaking weird. It just outputs that freaking weird code.
Yeah. So it does, and then that freaking weird code will get better as tracer gets better, right? And you don't have to change your code.
And eventually it disappears and you just keep your input directory,
Yep. Which would be nice.
in theory.
Eventually it's really long for time away.
And also, Google's got a tool that the name of it slips my mind right now, but they're source map. And what source map is you take something like this, you write whatever code, CoffeeScript or Tracer or paren script or any crazy language you want that compiles down to JavaScript, and you give it the original, and somehow it puts little like comment markers in it as to how the compiler changed it or something, so that when you look at it in your browser and it gives you an error message, you can see what it was on the line of CoffeeScript or the line of Tracer script.
And they already did a closure compiler, it outputs a source map file, and people have written tools that will sync that up. We are working on it for CoffeeScript as well.
So this is stuff available in Clojure, but there's a lot of stuff that they're talking about right now. There's maps and there's weak maps, which make garbage collection faster. So a lot of people use weak maps in their sets, so you can have stricter key value restrictions than a map if you want it. And yeah, there's just a whole bunch of new stuff. So I would encourage you guys to go to the Mozilla Developer Network and look at this Harmony stuff. And then it has a link to the JS.Next site, and go and read what they're talking about. It's pretty cool, some of this stuff. It's pretty exciting, so I'm excited anyway. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.